Alright, hello, welcome back everybody. PayPal, Patreon are down below if you want to support me, and we do so if you actually can. And as always, if you want access to the graphs used in this video, or any kinds of other graphs, hundreds of them, they're all available for free in a Drive folder linked in the description. Any financial support helps with the maintenance and updating of that as well. Anyways, going down the list of OPEC members for the monthly OPEC oil production levels update. Starting with the largest, Saudi Arabia. They have returned to their 10 million barrel per day plateau, and it looked like they were going to be exceeding it, but now they're holding back. They're still going up a little bit, but only by really incremental amounts. They're closer to 10.1 now, but they've increased from 10 up to close to 10.1 over the course of the last 3 months. They're coming in at 10.08. And if they do not exceed it by a large amount or go back down to large undercutting, then they should reach the end of their plateau capability around 2032, maybe 2033. We'll see. Algeria peaked at about 1.4 and had declined close to a million before the semi-eternal production cuts began. And thanks to some small new fields and some enhanced recovery operations, their capacity is probably still at about a million barrels per day, maybe a bit above, and it looks like that is turning out to be the case, as their increases have slowed down, now only going up by 3 or 4 thousand barrels per day each month as they continue trying to restore everything. This time getting up over 970, coming in at 972,000 barrels per day. Meanwhile, their own domestic oil consumption, their own oil demand, is up to around 500,000 barrels per day themselves already. Their neighbor Libya continuing to try to restore prior capabilities, pre-Civil War capabilities, and they had gotten up to about 1.42, slipped back down slowly to 1.35, but are starting to recover from that slip up and are back up to 1.37 million barrels per day. Nigeria once held a wobbly plateau around 2 million barrels per day, and they technically still could if everything was restored from all the infrastructural degradation that is the result of terrorist attacks, oil pipeline theft, and embezzling of the funds by government officials who were otherwise supposed to spend that money on maintenance and infrastructure upkeep for the oil and gas infrastructure. So they saw their capability drop down as low as 1.3, and they've restored it a bit up to about 1.5. This time they came in right at a flat 1.5 million barrels per day. The UAE, even before the production cuts were over, was already kind of done playing by the rules, and they even went back up and above their normal plateau before the cuts ended and are making their way towards their desired plateau of 4 million barrels per day, higher than their prior 3 million barrel per day plateau, as they want to have a wider export margin since their own domestic consumption is now over 1.2 million barrels per day. And they came in right at 3.5 million barrels per day now. Kuwait also held a 3 million barrel per day plateau before the cuts, and has been one of the slowest ones in restoring their production levels. They went as far down as 2.4 and have very gradually almost come back to 2.6 now, this time coming in at 2.58. Iraq continues restoring a bunch of stuff and is now back up to 4.6 million barrels per day. And if the full capacity of the pipeline through Turkey is allowed, and they reactivate all of that particular capacity in Kurdistan, then they should go back up to about 4.8, which was their highest ever. And this year, several capacity expansion projects are supposed to come online across a number of fields that should bring over at least 200,000 barrels per day of new capacity. So it should, by the end of this year, put Iraq above 5 million barrels per day. Iran once held a 6 million barrel per day plateau before the revolution. They were never able to restore it after that, instead held it at about 4. Then, once they entered the sanctions era and nobody was buying from them, they obviously had to shut down their production to match only the levels of their own domestic consumption, which is close to 2 million barrels per day under normal circumstances. Their production they restored after the sanctions ended, but were only able to recover up to about 3.4 before they started falling, as their fields are so degraded and their infrastructure has not been well maintained all that much. And since recovering to a maximum of 3.4, they've declined over the past year or so, now down to under 3.2, coming in at 3.19. And that 3.19 was before the current uprising started. So, no idea exactly what it may have dropped to over the last 2 weeks. Venezuela was a bit before that, so we have a better picture. They once held 3 million barrels per day, and they could do so again. The Orinoco Belt was capable of that and is actually capable of probably 5 or 6, which is kind of the entire reason for the military intervention that happened to rearrange things internally, get a more friendly to outside industries regime in charge, which the interim president or the vice president who took over immediately capitulated to all of the US's oil demands. So Venezuela is going to eventually be brought up to its real capabilities. But after collapsing, when the country collapsed, taking its oil production down with it, its production was only brought very gradually back up to about 1.1. And during the events that took place in the week or two surrounding them, they dropped down to about 900,000 because they temporarily shut stuff since they didn't know if they were going to be able to continue exporting once the blockade was implemented. But now that that deal has been settled, they're returning back up to regular levels. And the two small members, Gabon, who is now back up to and continuing to hold in the lower 200s, this time coming in at 227. And the smaller of the two Congos, the more stable one, was down to and holding in the upper mid 200s until just now bringing on a small new field offshore that gave them a little bit of a boost up to 281,000 barrels per day of production. All right, that's it for this one. Thank you everybody for sticking around and listening. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already. PayPal, Patreon, whatever, YouTube, super button stuff. Also, that's all down there if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. There's a link to a Drive folder in the description with these graphs and hundreds of other kinds of graphs across all kinds of subjects. There's a link in the top pinned comment to my cat's YouTube channel. May God bless and protect all of you, and I will see you all around next time.